If 2014 was a vote for change and 2019 was a national security and nationalism election, what is 2024's core issue? I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. Today we'll be looking at the findings of a survey by Lokniti CSDS that asks precisely this question. What do voters care about the most in this election? In 2014, Narendra Modi romped home to power as the Congress was booted out. 2019 was held against the backdrop of Pulwama and Balakot. But in 2024, while the backdrop of Ram Mandir in Ayodhya is there, is this a Hindutva election? Is this an election about governance and development? Is this an election about corruption? Or is this an election about the daily lives of people? And if it is that, then why doesn't the opposition seem to have a more compelling narrative? There's a lot to talk about, so let me introduce our newsmaker on the program today. Professor Sanjay Kumar of the CSDS is with us. Welcome to the program, sir. And it's a very, very interesting pre-poll survey. I was going through the findings and we'll look at them one by one. Let me start by actually bringing up, when you asked voters, what is the issue that matters the most? You know, when we look at how people spoke about unemployment vis-a-vis how they spoke about Hindutva, it is very, very interesting, right? So as that slide comes up, why don't you tell us a little bit more? 27% of people polled in your pre-poll survey say unemployment matters more than anything else.
Yes, in the survey, when we asked this question, which is going to be one big issue in this election for a voter like you, a very large number of people, 27% mentioned that it is going to be unemployment. And similarly, a very large number of people mentioned that price rise is going to be a very important issue. That is what is the concern of the common people as we see on the ground at the moment.
When we actually look at this issue in comparison to the other issues, right, unemployment is on the top of the list. And if we can please have that particular slide up now, unemployment is on the top of the list. But you also asked voters what they cared about, other issues: price rise, development, corruption, Ram Mandir, Hindutva. Now let's just stay on this slide for just one moment. 27% people polled say unemployment, 8% say Ram Mandir, 8% say corruption, and only 2% say Hindutva. Now, what I found very interesting about this slide in your survey is that Ram Mandir and Hindutva are not considered the same issue. They are looked at somewhat differently. The Mandir is perhaps sabki khwahish, sabki, a kind of spiritual sentiment. And Hindutva is seen as perhaps more political. Can you explain this comparison?
I think, Barkha, it is important to tell the viewer that this is an open-ended question. These are not the list of issues which has been offered to the voter to choose one of those. So it is an open-ended question, very typically asked in a sense, which is going to be the biggest issue for a voter like you in this election. And unemployment and price rise, which is our day-to-day affair, with which we concern in our day-to-day life. So these are the two things which is on the top of the mind. If you ask directly whether Ram Mandir is an important issue for them or not, a very large number of people are going to say Ram Mandir is an issue or maybe an issue. Hindutva, whether they think Hindutva should be an issue in this election or not, they would definitely say Hindutva is going to be a big issue. I'm not sure what percentage of people will say that, but when they have to, this is an open-ended question where you allow the voter to think which is going to be the biggest issue. And the first response has been noted down from the respondent. And it is not surprising to note that for 27% people, 27 unemployment comes at the top of their mind. So the first response comes to them is berojgari hai, mehegai hai. That is why we see unemployment and price rise as a very large proportion of people saying unemployment and price rise as the big election issue.
Now, this is a very important clarification from you. It's not that the surveyors gave these 6-7 issues and said rank them. It was an open-ended question. Bhai, sabse bada mudda kya hai? And the largest number of people said berozgari, unemployment. Now we'll bring up the next slide. How difficult has it been to get jobs, or how difficult is it to get jobs in the last 5 years? But I have a political question, Sanjay ji, as this slide comes up. If unemployment is top of the mind, and clearly it is, because we even have people lining up to take a job in war-torn Israel. Can we stay on the slide on how difficult it is to get jobs? Can we stay on the slide on how difficult it is to get jobs? And as we look at that particular issue, I want you to talk about why then there isn't palpable anti-incumbency.
Sorry, what's the question, Barkha?
Why, if people care so much about jobs and unemployment and price rise, yet we do not see any visible overt anti-incumbency. So how do you explain that seeming political contradiction?
If you look at, if I give an analogy of a cricket team, you could have a very good batsman, but you could have weak bowlers. And it could be the other way around. So what is happening is that on some issues, the government, in people's perception or people's assessment, government is not doing good job. And but there are other issues on which government seems to be doing good job. That is why, despite people finding difficult to get a job, despite people feeling the pinch of price rise, and despite people saying unemployment is a big issue, we don't see that converting into kind of, the support which political parties are getting on the ground, which we get, the sense which we get from the day-to-day campaign.
So explain how you think that will manifest in the elections. Before we look at other findings of the survey, how do you see it manifesting? Or do you think it's a failure? Okay, it could be one of two things. It could be a failure of the opposition to actually build a narrative around some of these concerns. Or it could be that while people have these issues, they still believe the Modi government is best placed to resolve their problems. And we don't know which one it is.
Both. Even if people think that finding a job is difficult, unemployment is a big problem, prices are high, but at the back of their mind, they also believe that if there is anyone who can solve these problems, minimize these difficulties for the people, it could only be BJP government, it could only be Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The hope among for the opposition leaders or opposition party is very little. So the opposition party has not been able to, generate the kind of confidence they should be generating. That's one. Other, that, if they compare BJP's performance on other issues, they think that government may not have been able to do good job on the issues of unemployment and price rise. But when it comes to other issues, and the other issues which we have hinted a couple of times, Hindutva, Ram Mandir, those are the issues on which people think that the government has been able to do a very decent job.
So, are you suggesting somewhere that even though only 8% offered Ram Mandir is the biggest issue top of their mind, compared to 27% who offered unemployment and 23% who offered price rise, somewhere Ram Mandir or Hindutva might be compensating for the discontent on other fronts?
Absolutely. If we don't get that sense from the question which we are discussing at the moment, but I'm sure as we move closer to the day of election, Barkha, we should not forget that the first day of voting is on the 19th of April, 17th of April is Ram Navami, and there would be a lot of celebration across the country, especially in the North India. So Ram Mandir is going to come at the forefront of BJP's election campaign, maybe in few days' time. So that's going to dominate people's mind when it comes to their choice of voting, which party they should vote for.
Okay, I want to bring up the next slide, which is how people look at development. And you, of course, pose this question across classes. And this was a very interesting question because you pose this question to the poor, to the lower income groups, to the middle class, and of course to the upper middle class, for the relatively wealthy. Now, what's very interesting in this finding is that a lot of people, I'm going to let you explain the slide actually, Sanjay ji. Look at these slides. 41% of the poor say that there is development for all. 34% say only for the rich. अब आप middle class को देखेंगे तो you'll find that number higher naturally. 50%, because they're better off than the poor, say that there has been development for all. And as you grow up the class, as you go up the class ladder, 55% of the upper middle class or the relatively wealthy believe that there has been development for all. But once again, this does point to economic hardship or the perception that there is inequality as a potential electoral issue. And once again, we're not seeing, although the opposition talks a lot about economy and development, this being able to, getting converted into a political narrative. How do you reconcile that with your findings?
Uh, I'm not sure whether this is going to turn into a political narrative in favor of opposition or not. But look at I would consider it as a milder distinction between how poor and the upper think about whether the development has been for all or only for the rich. Um, I was expecting a much sharper distinction between or poorer being more critical about the developmental agenda of the ruling party compared to the rich, because I was hoping that middle class and the rich would expect that the benefits have gone more to them. But I think because of the various welfare schemes rolled out by this government during last 4 or 5 years, even the poor, sizable number of poor believe, though we see the distinction, only for the rich 34% and for all is 41% versus 55%. So the distinction should have been much sharper, but I think the divide between rich and the poor still remains, but not as sharp as one would expect looking at the situation on the ground.
Now, one of our members asks a question. The irony is the divergence between unemployment being the prime issue and the opposition's focus on all other issues under the sun, such as the end of democracy. Now, this is a very interesting question that has the opposition picked up an abstract, esoteric, sort of construct, which they may think is very important, but the average voter or the average Indian doesn't care about it because they don't think it's the end of democracy, because they only relate to this argument through their vote. Right? How would you respond to this comment that the opposition hasn't actually focused on these issues in a successful way? With Biru Phillips saying, I was going to ask that as well.
So I have a very strong view on that, Barkha. Opposition has tried to pick up the big issue is the democracy bachao. Even if you remember the rally which was held in Delhi a couple of Sundays ago,
Yeah.
what was the big narrative? Loktantra bachao.
Yeah.
But if you talk to the common people on the ground, they don't see this as an issue on the ground. They think that Loktantra is doing fine, democracy is doing fine. Elections take place every 5 years for the state assembly election, Lok Sabha elections. There are governments which get re-elected, governments get defeated. They have the freedom to go to the polling station, cast their vote. Nobody prevents them from voting. The elections have become much free and fair. If you if the way they experience when they go out to vote on the polling station. People who are in the 70s and 80s, they remember the times in the 90s when elections used to be very violent in UP, Bihar, and many other states. So for them, they think democracy is doing fine. So I'm not sure whether opposition has picked up the issue which connects to the people on the ground. I think this is a wrong strategy of BJP, of the opposition. If This is my understanding of how opposition has picked up these issues.
Now, another question that we must raise is how much corruption is going to be an issue in these elections, right? And this is coming at a time when the rally that you spoke about was held by the opposition in solidarity with Arvind Kejriwal. Corruption remains something that the voter believes has increased. मुझे ये आपका स्लाइड काफी इंटरेस्टिंग लगा. Look at this. Whether it's in villages, whether it's in towns, whether it's in cities, you have a majority of people. In fact, the more sort of developed the unit, the more people believe that corruption is having an impact on their lives, right? So 55% in villages, 53% in towns, 57% in cities. But we don't know that it is an electoral issue. Like, we don't know how to read these numbers. How do you read them?
We should not misunderstand with this slide with what everybody is talking about, electoral bond. This is the experience of common people on the ground. This is no indication of whether corruption has increased at the top level. This is about our day-to-day experience about corruption. Going to a police station, going to your passport office, going to your driving license office, wherever you go, You have to pay what you call suvidha shulk. You have to pay some money to get your work done. So it is a day-to-day experience of the people, which has come out very clearly from a survey which we have done among 10,000 people spread across the country in 100 parliamentary constituencies. And this is a national representative sample. That is why we have been able to bifurcate the opinions with regard to people living in villages, town, and the big cities.
Now, we have another Mojo member, Prasad Duvuri, who says, Barkha, we have transitioned from a poor country to a developing one. Our polity now wants to know what's in it for me. The BJP is speaking to that, whereas the opposition is in an activism mode. Do you agree with that comment?
Sorry, Barkha, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah. The question, the our audience Mojo member says, we have transitioned from a poor country to a developing one. The voter now wants to know what's in it for me. The BJP is demonstrating that, but the opposition is in activist mode.
No, that is the precise difficulty with the BJP. Whenever you come out with the data about rising prices, unemployment, people feeling the pinch of unemployment on the ground, so there would be a counter narrative put up by the BJP and the government, and those data would come from growth rate, etc. The common man is not bothered about those big figures. The common man is worried about when they go out to buy essential commodities, when they go out to the vegetable market to buy vegetables, food grains,
Yeah.
milk, and essential commodities. Do they think that it has become cheaper or even the prices has remained the same? Most of the people feel that the prices have gone up 50 times, uh,
Yeah.
60% times if you compare the prices of food grains and essential commodities during last 6-8 months. So the big data which is being offered as a counter narrative by the government doesn't help the common man on the ground.
Yeah, but when you again go back to those open-ended questions you asked, and 27% talking about unemployment, 23% talking about price rise, I am still uh, I am still confused, and I'm confused about why we're not hearing this being the centerpiece of the political gupshup, the speeches. The speeches are about inflammable, emotive issues. The speeches are about, you know, all kinds of identity politics, both sides. Ek taraf opposition will talk about democracy, will talk about media, right? The other side, the BJP will talk about, yes, they do talk about development, but also about a whole bunch of emotive issues. Why is this not more central to the campaign?
I think on both sides, whether it is the ruling party or the opposition parties, I think both the sides have realized that these are the issues with which people have, realized to, or people have developed the habit to live with. People will not be, people will not believe if a party puts it in the manifesto that they are going to solve the unemployment issue. If the party comes to power, they will be able to resolve the issue of price rise. So I think the parties on both the sides have realized that these are not the issues on which they will be able to mobilize the voters in a sizable manner. They have to come up with something else. So these are the narratives which comes and go, but they want to mobilize the voters on emotive issues, because elections are all about perception. They are not looking at, and this is the perception data. Even if the government comes out with the data that employment has been generated to a great extent, maybe, but this is the perception that unemployment, there is a problem of unemployment. So the perception which has gone among the people of this country is that no party will be able to solve these problems of unemployment and price rise in an effective manner. And I think political parties have started responding to, and they don't care much about addressing these two issues, while they take recourse to some other issues which are the emotive issues, whether it is Ram Mandir or whether you are talking about caste census.
Yeah. Again, the Prasad, who asked that question, said, I agree with the professor, but I'm making the point that 10, 15 years ago, the poor would have supported an angry young man activist persona, but today they look to the BJP to deliver. There's one other comment from Raghavinder Joshi who says corruption may have increased across villages, towns, and cities, But while the BJP is able to divert the attention of the electorate, there is also a perception that the opposition will do no better. This is important because while people have problems, they're not necessarily reposing faith in the opposition, at least nationally. And these are national elections.
No, BJP has been able to divert the attention because if you go by the data which we have shared in the national media today, people
Yes.
believe that corruption has gone up. But as I said, it's not the belief that corruption has gone up at the top level of governance. Prime Minister Modi's image still remains undented. There is no taint on Prime Minister Modi's image. So people believe that yes, these are small corruption, but Prime Minister Modi is still running a government which is free and fair, honest government, a very strong government. That is why this issue does not translate into people voting against the government.
Now, contrast this, Sanjay ji, with 2014, right? This is a very important point that you've made. Can we have the corruption slide up? You've just said the perception of increased corruption is not about the top levels of government. The prime minister has an untainted image. Now, you remember Manmohan Singh. Manmohan Singh was seen to have corruption was alleged to have thrived on his watch, but he personally was not accused of corruption. Now, you make the important point that the prime minister is untainted in this perception of increased corruption. That's about small units of governance, people's daily lives, buying a house, selling a house, getting something done from a local government office and so on. What is the difference? Prime minister is untainted, but is the BJP untainted? Because these are two separate questions.
No, I don't think that the if we have asked this question in the survey, and we do get a sense that people have started asking questions about BJP's image, raising questions about BJP's image. They don't think that there is much difference when it comes to BJP's image as an honest party compared to other. But I will cite one. This is not a question which we have asked in this survey, but in an earlier survey, we asked this question. Would you like to vote for a candidate who may be corrupt but gets your work done? Or would you like to vote for a candidate who is an honest person, can't get your work done? A very large number of people said, we are happy to vote for a person who is corrupt but gets our work done. So the question which you raised about Manmohan Singh government, yes, Manmohan Singh himself was considered as an honest prime minister, but still he was thrown out of power because it was seen as a non-functioning government, a non-functional government, and we all know that 2013 there was a big saying, uh, paralysis, government paralysis. In a sense, nothing was working in the government. I think that is what hurt the Congress at the time of 2014 election. Not only corruption, corruption was one big issue, but along with the corruption, the government was seen as a non-functioning government.
Yeah. And, as Binu Philip from our audience says, that one thing you hear people repeatedly say is who else is there? Now, how important or how critical is that? People may be discontented. People may be willing to go to Israel for jobs, getting duped into the Russian war क्योंकि उनको नौकरी की उम्मीद या better life की उम्मीद है, but they still do not see who is going to come and make that different or make that better. How critical is that?
Standalone, it's not a critical issue, in my opinion. But if you club it with others and if you start comparing, my own sense is, Barkha, that at the moment there are 5 or 6% of the voters in this country who are not very keen or not very excited to vote for the BJP. But they would end up voting for the BJP because of the issue, the very issue which you are asking. Whom should we vote for? What is the alternative? If we don't want to vote for the BJP, whom should we vote for? What is the alternative? So, given other situation in the country, I think this has become an important issue. If other things were, better with regard to the opposition, if the opposition had remained united, they would have put up a, joint manifesto or something of that kind, some positive agenda. I think this issue of not having a formidable face would not have been there. But at this moment, this has become a big issue in 2024 elections.
Let me look at one of your final slides. You asked people, how do you rate the quality of your life, right? And this is a very interesting slide because in a way it captures what seems to be somewhat of a paradox of this moment. After identifying unemployment, price rise, jobs difficulty, 48%, that's nearly 50%, say life has become better. Now, this is a very important slide because 35% say it's worse, but 48% say it's better, and 14% say it's the same. So, no negative emotion. That means that more than 60%, more than 60% of Indians are actually either feeling better about their lives or feeling the same or feeling no worse. How important is this slide?
This is important, but this has to be connected with general feeling of the Indians.
Mhm.
The sense of fatalism. In a sense, whatever I am getting is because of the work which I do and whatever I have done in my previous life. Remember,
Yeah,
Barkha, even at the peak of the COVID crisis, when there were lots and lots of death, we
yeah,
kept asking that question in several surveys after the COVID, and even among the families which has suffered loss of life of the bread earner in the family, and they would say it's important to move on, forget about what has happened in the past. That was the dark days of our in our family, in the life of in the life of our history. So that is what is coming out. Level of satisfaction, generally people tend to be satisfied. If the data would have been reverse worse, if it was a very large number, I think there would have been a lot of unrest in this country. Very large number of people believe chalo jo hai theek hi hai, and that is why people believe chalo theek hi hai, because people tend to compare with what how they see their the present compared to the past. And that is why I'm not very surprised with the data which is on the screen. You go to the village, a person who may not have eaten, who may not have two times food to eat, but if you ask him, are you satisfied? And the level of you will be surprised to know that he would say, yes, संतुष्ट है जी, जो कुछ भी है ठीक है. It's only
yeah.
among the middle class who may be getting a hefty salary, but if you ask, are you satisfied? He would say, नहीं, budget में कोई tax का rebate नहीं मिला, मैं तो बहुत दुखी
Gee.
हूँ. So this is how the common people of this country think, and that is what is getting reflected in the data which is on the screen now.
Okay, let's end with the last question as we look at the biggest issues. Can we have the slide of the biggest issues up? Like you said, again, I'm clarifying this was an open ended question. It's not that you all provided the topics. They, on their own, people volunteered. Berozgari, कीमतें बढ़ रही हैं, development is the big issue. Corruption, 8% are still saying corruption is an issue. 8% are still saying Ram Mandir is an issue. अपने आप ही. Now, I will end this conversation, Sanjay ji, by asking you if you were the government. Okay, let's start with the opposition. If you were the opposition looking at these findings, how would you calibrate your political strategy at this stage in the campaign?
No, if I was in the opposition, I would still keep hammering on the two issues of unemployment, not on price rise, but unemployment. Because unemployment, if the government is able to generate employment, many issues can be resolved. The price rise, etc., could be resolved. So if I am in opposition, I would keep hammering the whole issue of unemployment and comparing it what was promised by the government in the past, what it has been able to deliver. So this juxtaposing with the promises with the deliverables, that should be the strategy of the government, not Loktantra Bachao and Samvidhan Bachao ka chunav.
Hmm.
If I am in the
The strategy of the opposition, you mean, not of the government, the strategy of the
absolutely
opposition.
strategy of the opposition.
Now, if you were in the government and you were looking at the same slide, can we have that slide back? If you were in the government and you were looking at the same slide, how concerned would you be that on their own, 27% of Indians are worried about unemployment? You have young men who are ready to go to a war-torn country for a job. How seriously would you worry, and would you look to deflect, or would you look to take this issue on head on? If you were the
I
government
would
looking at the same,
If I
yeah.
am in the government, I would share my concern about that, if these two issues. But what government has been doing, if we look at the strategy of campaign during last few months or couple of years, I would keep citing this as a pertinent problem in the country over the last 40, 50 years. But I will share my concern. I will not try to counter this data with the other data sources like employment. So much of employment has been generated. So I would share my concern, share my anxiety, but keep citing this that these are not the new issue which has cropped up during last 5 years or 10 years, even in 24, even in 2004, even in 1999, even in 1996. These were the big issues in this country. Government, if I was in the government, I would try and put forward before the people of this country what efforts government has been able to take forward made in order to resolve the problem of unemployment and price rise. So I think this would be the strategy. But Ram Mandir or Hindutva, as we know, elections have been won in the past on emotive issues. That's going to be an important issue even in 2024. So I'm not going to, uh, leave my side from those on the two issues. Ram Mandir, Hindutva, I will keep an eye on that, and I would try and put it forward in the among the voters. And as we know, the government, there is a lot of talk about what has not been done on the last during last 500 years. Have been able to do. Modi government has been able to do that, and it is about Ram Mandir. So I think these are the two strategies. If I am in opposition, this is the strategy. If I am in the ruling party, this would be my strategy.
Okay, before we let you go, just one question from Prasad on the methodology. I think you mentioned that you surveyed 10,000 people. Your questions were open-ended. You did not provide the issues. If you just want to answer that, yeah.
Not all questions were open-ended. In a survey, normally you ask a lot of closed-ended question. But yes, the question on the issue of election, that was an open-ended question. We allow the respondent to say what they want to say, which is noted down. This is a 10,000 sample across the country, spread across 18 states. We went to 100 parliamentary constituencies, but it more than 10,000 sample. It is important to tell the viewer that this is the national representative sample, which represents men, women, rural, urban, and various communities in similar proportion as they say in India's voter list.
Okay, Sanjini, we leave it there. What will be very interesting is that in maybe, a couple of weeks from now, as the election temperature heats up, does the BJP focus more on the emotive issues, less on the economic issues? Does the opposition focus more on the economic issues? And apart from everything else, do the people who are identifying these issues feel like they have two options to choose from, or are they feeling like issues to hai but options nahi hai? We leave it there. Professor Sanjay Kumar, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank
Namaskar,
you.
sir.
Thank you.
Namaskar.
Namaskar and hello everyone. Welcome to a ride through the heart and the soul of India. क्योंकि जब इलेक्शन सीजन आता है तो कौन जीता, कौन हारा, कौन आगे, कौन पीछे, ये बातचीत तो होती ही रहती है. But it's also a time for travel and meeting people and getting to know your own country better. So, welcome to the dhabas of democracy, where every bite tells a story, where every conversation will spice up your day. Experience the masala, the flavor, the swad of this election with us as we take a unique road trip from the south to the north of India, traveling thousands of kilometers to bring you the flavor of this election.
इलेक्शन सर पर है, वोटर अपना मन बना रहे हैं. ऐसे में आपको चाहिए सही फैक्ट, सही ज्ञान, सही नॉलेज. इसी कड़ी में मोजो स्टोरी लेकर आ रहा है एक खास कार्यक्रम, बैलेट की बात. मैं हूं पॉलिटिकल रिसर्चर कार्तिकेय बत्रा और मैं चाहता हूं आपके दिन के केवल 2 मिनट. कैंडिडेट्स, पार्टीज, अलायंसेस, इश्यूज, इन सब पर होगी बात. और होगा रोज आपका एक छोटा सा पॉलिटिकल टेस्ट. स्पेशल प्राइजेस फॉर दोज हु आर द